My wife secretly funneled $85,000 from our joint accounts to lease a luxury penthouse for a man I had never met. I didn't cry. I simply logged into our primary banking portal, executed a series of financial asset transfers I had prepared days in advance, and watched the digital locks engage. 48 hours later, her entire world collapsed at a high-end boutique in downtown Seattle, and she never saw it coming. For 7 years, I was the anchor to Chloe's drifting ship. When we first met, her vivacious energy felt like a necessary counterweight to my meticulous, numbers-driven personality. I run a mid-sized commercial logistics firm, a business built on predictability, tight margins, and quiet competence. Chloe, on the other hand, was an independent real estate agent who thrived exclusively on optics. In her world, perception was reality. If you looked overwhelmingly successful, the universe would simply hand you success. For a long time, I accommodated her desperate need for the aesthetic of wealth. I paid the premium mortgage on a house that was objectively too big for 3 people. I covered the exorbitant leases on cars that depreciated the second she drove them off the dealership lot. I swallowed my frustration to keep the peace, convincing myself that this was simply the cost of a modern marriage. But entitlement is a creeping, insidious disease. Chloe was the golden child of her family, raised by a mother who treated credit limits as mere suggestions and a father who routinely decimated his retirement funds to bail them of disastrous financial decisions. Chloe brought that exact toxic dynamic directly into our home. Whenever I attempted to set reasonable boundaries around our discretionary spending, the gaslighting would immediately begin. She would look at me with wide, wounded eyes, accusing me of being financially controlling, of suffocating her limitless potential, of simply not understanding the vital investment she was making in her personal brand. According to her, the $600 Tuesday dinners and the spontaneous, unbudgeted trips to Aspen were networking necessities. I was just too blue-collar in my thinking to grasp the grand vision. I absorbed the insults. I worked longer hours at the firm. I made sure our 7-year-old daughter, Mia, wanted for nothing, quietly setting up an ironclad 529 college savings plan that required dual, biometric signatures for any withdrawal. I thought I had built an impenetrable fortress around the things that truly mattered. I was naive. The first major crack in the foundation didn't come from a careless bank statement or a misplaced late-night text message. It came from Sarah. Sarah had been Chloe's best friend since their sophomore year of college. Unlike the superficial, ladder-climbing socialites Chloe usually surrounded herself with, Sarah was firmly grounded in reality. She was a pediatric oncology nurse, fiercely loyal, and entirely unimpressed by exclusive zip codes or designer labels. I always liked and respected Sarah. She was the one person on earth who could occasionally pierce through Chloe's delusions of grandeur and force her to look at the actual math of her life. But over the last 14 months, I had noticed a distinct, freezing chill in the air between them. Sarah abruptly stopped coming over for our casual Sunday barbecues. The frequent, hours-long phone calls dwindled to nothing. When I asked Chloe about the distance, she simply waved her manicured hand dismissively, claiming Sarah was intimidated by our rapid success and had allowed her own insecurities to become toxic. I accepted the lie because it was significantly easier than digging through the mud for the truth. That was my greatest mistake. It was a Tuesday evening in late October. The heavy Seattle rain was beating relentlessly against the floor-to-ceiling windows of my home office. Chloe was supposedly at a 3-day luxury real estate retreat in Portland, networking with high-net-worth commercial investors. I was nursing a glass of neat bourbon, reviewing the quarterly tax liabilities for my LLC, when my personal cell phone vibrated on the desk. The caller ID read, Sarah. I stared at the glowing screen for a long, heavy moment, a strange knot of dread forming in my stomach. Sarah hadn't called my personal number directly in over 2 years. I answered on the 4th ring. Hello, David, she said. Her voice wasn't just serious. It was trembling with a tightly coiled, frantic tension. Are you alone? Mia is asleep upstairs. I'm down in my office. Why? Is everything all right? There was a profound pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint, rhythmic sound of highway traffic behind her, as if she were sitting in a parked car on the shoulder of a busy interstate. When she finally spoke, The words shattered the quiet, carefully maintained illusion of my life with surgical precision. Chloe isn't in Portland, Sarah said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. And she hasn't closed a single real estate contract in 6 months. My hand gripped the sharp edge of my mahogany desk. The ambient noise of the rain suddenly felt deafening in my ears. I didn't interrupt her. I let the silence hang there, demanding more. I couldn't carry it anymore, David, Sarah continued, her breath catching slightly in her throat. I tried to force her to confess. I gave her strict ultimatums. But she's completely lost her mind. She's actively destroying everything you've worked for, and I absolutely refuse to let her take you and Mia down with her. You need to look closely at the offshore vendor account. The one she convinced you to set up for her international staging clients last year. That account has a strict minimum balance requirement, Sarah. I monitor the inbound transfers. You monitor the doctored PDF statement she leaves on your desk, Sarah corrected gently, the pity in her voice cutting deeper than a knife. David, she's been forging the routing documents. She's moving the money to a private shell company in Delaware. It's registered under a completely different name. Whose name? I asked. My voice was eerily calm. The emotional devastation hadn't registered yet. Only the cold, mechanical reality of a catastrophic data breach. Marcus Vance, Sarah replied. He's a 24-year-old fitness instructor. She's been paying his exorbitant rent. She bought him a Porsche Macan in cash last week. David, she's planning to blindside you and leave, but not until she successfully drains the primary equity line on the house. I closed my eyes. The disjointed puzzle pieces of the last year, the sudden, aggressive need for privacy regarding her business accounts, the defensive, screaming outbursts over minor questions, phantom business trips locked into place with sickening, undeniable clarity. She hadn't just been having a cliché affair. She had been methodically, maliciously dismantling our financial security to bankroll her pathetic delusion. She was treating our marriage, our life, like a venture capital fund waiting to be liquidated. Why are you choosing to tell me this tonight? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Because she just asked me to sign a legally binding affidavit claiming I was a witness to you being emotionally and verbally abusive, Sarah said, her tone hardening into pure, unadulterated disgust. She's building a false, documented narrative for the divorce proceedings. She wants full, uncontested custody of Mia, and she wants the house. She thinks, because you work so much, she can easily paint you as an absentee, negligent father. My blood ran cold. The money was one thing. The money was just a number on a ledger. I could rebuild wealth. But Mia, my daughter? Thank you, Sarah, I said, my voice dropping an octave. I'll take it from here. I hung up the phone. I didn't throw my expensive glass against the wall. I didn't scream into the empty room. I simply opened my laptop, pulled up the master directory of our entire financial architecture, and began the quiet, systematic process of total erasure. The digital architecture of our life was complex, but I held the master keys. Chloe had always found financial administration boring, willingly handing me the administrative control of our primary wealth mechanisms while she focused entirely on spending liquid output. That intellectual laziness was about to become her financial tomb. First, I targeted the liquidity. I logged into our joint banking portal. Legally, any joint account holder can drain the balance. I didn't take half. I took everything. I transferred the entire balance of our checking and high-yield savings, roughly $240,000, into a newly minted, highly secure individual account under a separate, obscure banking institution. Next, I moved to the credit lines. Chloe carried 3 premium credit cards in her designer wallet, an Amex Platinum, a Chase Sapphire Reserve, and a corporate Visa strictly tied to my logistics firm. She arrogantly thought they were joint accounts. They were not. I was the primary account holder, she was merely an authorized user. With 3 precise clicks, I completely revoked her privileges. The physical plastic in her Prada bag instantly became nothing more than useless, vibrantly colored bookmarks. Then came the most critical asset, the house. Chloe firmly believed that because we lived in Washington, a community property state, she was automatically entitled to 50% of our $2.5 million home. She was even counting on securing the entire estate given the false, fabricated abuse allegations she was secretly planning. But she had fundamentally misunderstood the dense legal paperwork we signed 6 years ago. The house was not owned by David and Chloe. It was owned by an ironclad irrevocable trust established by my late grandfather, of which I was the sole legal beneficiary. When we supposedly bought the house, the trust simply purchased it in cash. Chloe had only signed a complex tenancy agreement purposefully masked as a mundane HOA compliance form. She had absolutely no equity. Zero. By 3 p.m., the total financial lockdown was complete. I had effectively severed her access to my wealth without triggering a single automated notification to her smartphone. At 8:00 a.m., I was sitting perfectly still in the immaculate, glass-walled conference room of Harrison and Vance, the most ruthlessly efficient family law firm in Seattle. I wasn't there for a gentle consultation. I was there to declare scorched earth war. I slid a sleek, black encrypted flash drive across the polished oak table to Marcus Harrison, a senior partner notoriously known for leaving opposing counsel in absolute ruins. I need an airtight paper trail, I told him, my voice devoid of any human inflection. I want a forensic accountant to meticulously trace every single cent she diverted to her shell company and her 24-year-old lover. I want the fraudulent affidavit she tried to force her friend to sign officially documented as premeditated defamation. And I want an emergency ex parte order granting me temporary full custody of my daughter, explicitly citing severe flight risk and gross financial instability. Marcus calmly plugged the drive into his sleek laptop. He quickly scanned the preliminary documents I had exported: the forged routing numbers, the offshore vendor records, the terrified text Sarah had forwarded me. A slow, predatory smile spread across his sharply angled face. She genuinely thinks she's preparing a brilliant smear campaign, Marcus murmured, adjusting his silver-rimmed glasses. But she just handed us the murder weapon with her own fingerprints smeared all over the handle. She comes home tomorrow afternoon, I said, leaning back into the cold leather chair. I want the divorce papers, the immediate eviction notice from the trust, and the temporary custody order finalized, stamped, and ready to serve by Friday morning. We'll be ready, Marcus replied softly. When Chloe walked through the front door on Thursday afternoon, dragging a vintage Louis Vuitton carry-on behind her, she played the part of the exhausted, hard-working corporate wife perfectly. She sighed dramatically, heavily dropping her designer keys on the imported marble console. Portland was absolutely draining, she complained, walking straight into the kitchen where I was quietly making me a peanut butter sandwich. She leaned in to casually kiss my cheek, smelling faintly of expensive champagne and a musky men's cologne that definitely wasn't mine. The commercial investors are so ridiculously tight-fisted right now. I seriously need a full spa day just to recover my sanity. I let out a short, humorless laugh, cleverly disguised as a dry cough. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of her performance was almost impressive. She was standing directly in my kitchen, actively plotting to steal my daughter and destroy my professional reputation, while loudly complaining about a fictitious business trip it never actually happened. You should definitely treat yourself, I said smoothly, handing me her porcelain plate. Take tomorrow completely off. Go downtown. Buy yourself something incredibly nice. Chloe's eyes immediately lit up with naked, predatory greed. Really? You honestly don't mind? I saw a stunning diamond tennis bracelet at the boutique on 5th Avenue last week. It would be the absolute perfect statement piece for the charity gala next month. Get it, I said softly, looking her dead in the eyes with zero emotion. You deserve exactly what's coming to you. She smiled warmly, completely oblivious to the lethal double meaning. Friday morning finally arrived. The invisible trap was perfectly set. Chloe woke up early, spending 2 uninterrupted hours meticulously styling her hair and applying flawless makeup. She was dressing for a triumphant victory lap, completely unaware that she was already totally bankrupt. She cheerfully kissed me a goodbye, told me she would definitely be back by 3 o'clock, and aggressively drove off in her leased white Mercedes. At exactly 11:45 a.m., I received a silent push notification on my phone from my Amex application. Decline transaction. $14,500. Bellevue Luxury Boutique. I didn't smile. I just coldly watched the glowing screen. 2 minutes later, my phone briefly buzzed again. Declined transaction. Chase Sapphire. Other 14,500. Bellevue Luxury Boutique. Then came the frantic, incredibly desperate text messages. Chloe, David, my cards are declining. Did you accidentally put a fraud alert on the accounts? I completely ignored it. Chloe, David, answer me. I'm standing right at the register. This is incredibly embarrassing. I calmly poured myself a fresh cup of black coffee. Chloe, the bank manager said the accounts are permanently closed. What did you do? Call me right now. I finally picked up the phone. I didn't call her. I sent a single, devastating text message in response. Me, check your email. Precisely 30 seconds prior, Marcus had flawlessly executed the digital delivery of the official divorce petition, the brutal forensic accounting summary detailing her exact fraud, and the judge signed temporary custody order. Attached securely to the bottom of the email was a higher resolution, undeniable photograph of her lover's apartment lease, prominently featuring her own forged signature. My phone immediately began to ring. Her name flashed frantically over and over on the screen. I silently watched it ring until it finally went to voicemail. She called again and again. The raw panic was deeply palpable through the digital signal. The grand illusion of her power, her infinite wealth, her total control, it was violently evaporating in real time right on the showroom floor of a high-end jewelry store. She had maliciously tried to bury me in the dark. She just didn't realize I owned the shovel. I spent the next 45 minutes in a state of preternatural stillness. I had already moved Mia to a trusted neighbor's house for a surprise weekend sleepover. The house was echoing with a hollow, expectant silence. I sat at the heavy quartz island in the kitchen, a physical folder of the forensic audit resting directly in front of me. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't trembling. I was waiting for the inevitable storm to make landfall. At 12:45 p.m., I heard the screech of tires on the cobblestone driveway. The front door didn't just open, it was violently slammed against the stop. Chloe didn't come alone. As I expected, she had brought reinforcements. Her mother, Evelyn. Evelyn was the original blueprint for Chloe's toxic entitlement. She was a woman who had spent 40 years weaponizing her fragility to bankrupt her husband and manipulate everyone in her social orbit. Seeing them together was like looking at a master and an apprentice in the art of professional victimhood. Chloe marched into the kitchen, her face a frantic, blotchy mask of rage and humiliation. She was still clutching her useless designer shopping bag, now empty of the diamond bracelet she thought she had earned. "What the hell is this, David?" she shrieked, slamming her phone down onto the counter. I was humiliated. The security guard had to escort me to the manager's office like I was some kind of common shoplifter because my cards were flagged as stolen. Do you have any idea what that did to my reputation in that store? I didn't stand up. I didn't even look away from the folder. Your reputation was a fiction, Chloe. A very expensive, very fraudulent fiction. How dare you? Evelyn stepped forward, her voice trembling with practiced, theatrical indignation. How dare you treat my daughter this way after everything she has sacrificed for this family? To cut off a wife's access to funds is financial abuse, David. It's disgusting. It's illegal. We will have you in court for this. I let out a short, humorless laugh and finally looked up. Financial abuse? That's an interesting choice of words, Evelyn. Especially considering your daughter has spent the last 14 months funneling nearly $90,000 of my company's operational capital into a Delaware shell company pay for a fitness instructor's lifestyle. The room went dead silent. The air seemed to physically leave the kitchen. Chloe's mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. Her face, which had been flushed with anger just seconds ago, suddenly drained of color. She looked less like a defiant wife and more like a cornered animal realizing the trap had already snapped shut. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered, the gaslighting reflex kicking in even as her world crumbled. That's business. Those were staging expenses for the West Coast accounts. You signed off on those transfers, David. You saw the invoices. I saw the forged PDFs you created on your laptop, I said, my voice low and dangerously steady. I slid the physical folder across the quartz toward her. The real invoices are in there, along with the bank records for Vance Logistics which, as it turns out, has no trucks, no warehouse, and no employees. Just one 24-year-old named Marcus who seems to enjoy the Porsche you bought him with Mia's future inheritance. Chloe reached for the folder, her hands shaking so violently she could barely flip the pages. Evelyn hovered over her shoulder, her eyes darting across the bank statements and the high-resolution photos of Chloe entering Marcus's penthouse. This is an invasion of privacy, Evelyn hissed, though the conviction was rapidly leaking out of her voice. You've been spying on your own wife? I've been protecting my daughter from a predator, I corrected her. And speaking of privacy, Chloe, I also have the draft of the affidavit you tried to force Sarah to sign. The one where you planned to lie under oath about me being abusive, so you could steal my house and my child. Chloe's knees seemed to give way. She gripped the edge of the island to keep from collapsing. David, please, you're blowing this out of proportion. Marcus was he was a mistake. A distraction. I was lonely because you're always working. I didn't mean any of it. The lonely defense is remarkably thin when it's accompanied by $85,000 in wire fraud, I said. And as for the house, you should probably read the second tab in that folder. She flipped the page. Her eyes scanned the trust documents, the original deed, and the notice of immediate lease termination. This is my home, she whispered, her voice cracking. We've lived here for 6 years. No, I said. This is a property owned by the Miller Family Irrevocable Trust. You are a guest whose invitation has been revoked for cause. There is a professional process server currently waiting in the driveway. He's already filed the paperwork. You have exactly 2 hours to pack what you can fit into your car. Anything left behind after 3 keep them and will be inventoried and moved to a secure storage unit at your personal expense. You can't do this. Evelyn screamed, her face contorting into a mask of pure, ugly venom. She is the mother of your child. You can't just throw her on the street. I'm not throwing her on the street. I'm sure Marcus has plenty of room in that penthouse I've been paying for, I said. And as for me, the court has already granted me temporary full custody based on the evidence of financial instability and the documented attempt to suborn perjury from Sarah. If you attempt to contact her or show up at her school, you will be in violation of a standing order. Chloe finally broke. She didn't cry out of remorse. She cried the ugly, desperate tears of a person who had finally run out of lies. She fell to her knee on the kitchen tile, reaching for my hand. David, please. Think about our family. Think about how this will look. We can go to counseling. I'll pay it all back. I'll do anything. Please don't do this to me. I didn't do this to you, Chloe, I said, pulling my hand away with a sense of profound, cold detachment. You did this to yourself. You looked at a man who gave you everything and decided it wasn't enough. You wanted to play the villain and the victim at the same time. But in the real world, the paper trail always catches up. I stood up and checked my watch. 1 hour and 52 minutes left. I suggest you start with the master closet. I've already cleared out my personal safe and moved it to a secure location. I walked out of the kitchen, leaving them standing in the wreckage of their own making. I went into the living room, sat in my favorite leather chair, and waited. For the next 2 hours, the house was a cacophony of slamming doors, muffled sobbing, and Evelyn's screeching voice on the phone, presumably calling every lawyer in the city only T. Obi told the same thing. The trust was airtight, and the fraud was undeniable. At exactly 2:55 p.m., I watched from the front window as Chloe and her mother loaded the last of their suitcases into the Mercedes. Chloe looked up at the house one last time. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow. She looked small. For the first time in 7 years, she wasn't the golden child. She was just a woman who had gambled her entire life on a lie and lost. I kept my voice steady as I spoke to the air. No contact. From this moment on, you only speak to Marcus Harrison. The car backed out of the driveway and disappeared around the corner. The room went dead silent. I didn't feel a surge of joy. I didn't feel a rush of adrenaline. I simply felt the immense, quiet relief of a man who had finally cut out a cancer before it could reach the bone. I picked up the phone and called Sarah. "It's done," I said. "Are you okay, David?" "I'm fine," I replied. "I'm better than I've been in years. I'm going to go pick up Mia now." I hung up, grabbed my keys, and walked out of the house. I didn't look back. I had a new life to build, and for the first time, the foundation was made of truth instead of debt. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in controlled demolition. Most people think revenge is a single, explosive moment, a cinematic confrontation in a rain-swept driveway. It isn't. Real revenge, the kind that lasts, is a slow, methodical grind. It's a mountain of paperwork, a series of cold depositions, and the quiet, persistent clicking of a forensic accountant's keyboard. I moved with surgical precision. While Chloe was likely huddled in Marcus's overpriced rental, crying to her mother about my cruelty, I was meeting with the board of directors at my logistics firm. I needed to ensure that her fraudulent staging invoices hadn't left any lingering tax liabilities for the company. I sat in our glass-walled boardroom, the same room where I had built my empire, and laid out the evidence. I didn't sugarcoat it. I didn't ask for sympathy. I presented the facts. $85,000 diverted, forged signatures, and a breach of fiduciary trust. She used our operational capital to fund a lifestyle for a third party. I told my partners, my voice steady and devoid of emotion. I've already reimbursed the firm for my personal capital. The police report for wire fraud has been filed. We are insulated. The room went dead silent. My partners, men who had known Chloe for years, looked at the documents with a mixture of shock and sheer disgust. The charming, successful real estate mogul they thought they knew was replaced by the image of a common thief. That was the first pillar to fall, her professional reputation. In a city like Seattle, where everyone in high-stakes business knows everyone else, word traveled like a wildfire in a drought. By the end of the week, 3 major developers had quietly pulled their listings from Chloe's agency. She was no longer an asset. She was a liability. Then came the smear campaign. Evelyn, true to her nature, tried to launch a preemptive strike on social media. She posted a long, rambling diatribe about financial domestic abuse and narcissistic control, painting a picture of me as a cold-hearted monster who had thrown a devoted mother onto the streets. She tagged my business partners, my daughter's school, and even a few local news outlets. I didn't engage. I didn't reply to the comments. I didn't send a cease and desist letter, at least, not yet. I waited for her to exhaust her ammunition. Once she had dug the hole deep enough, I handed Marcus Harrison the green light. He didn't just send a letter. He filed a comprehensive defamation lawsuit backed by the recorded testimony of Sarah and the forensic audit. We didn't ask for money. We asked for a public retraction and a permanent injunction. When the process server arrived at Evelyn's door with a stack of papers detailing the $85,000 in theft, the victim narrative evaporated. The social media posts were deleted within the hour. The silence that followed was deafening. But the most satisfying part of the fallout wasn't the legal victories. It was the predictable, inevitable collapse of Chloe's new life with Marcus. Without my bank accounts to fuel the fantasy, their true love lasted exactly 19 days. I know this because Sarah, who still maintained a distant, observational link to that world, called me with the update. "The Porsche is gone, David," she said, a hint of dark satisfaction in her tone. "The repo man took it from the parking garage on Tuesday." Apparently, Chloe missed the first 3 payments she was supposed to make after the initial deposit she stole from you. And Marcus? He wasn't quite so charming when the $5,000 rent for the penthouse came due. He moved out in the middle of the night, leaving her with the bill and a half-empty bottle of cheap vodka. I let out a short, humorless laugh. The audacity of thinking a 24-year-old fitness instructor was interested in her limitless potential instead of her limitless credit line. "She's staying in a Motel 6 near the airport, David," Sarah added. "She's been calling me, begging me to talk to you. She says she's humbled. She says she finally realizes that you were the only person who ever truly cared for her." "She doesn't realize I cared," I replied coldly. "She realizes she's broke. There's a massive difference between regret and the fear of being poor." I stayed true to my no-contact rule. Every call from an unknown number went to voicemail. Every desperate, multi-paragraph email was forwarded directly to Marcus Harrison without being read. I had set a boundary, and I was guarding it like a fortress. In the meantime, I focused on Mia. We went to therapy together not because she was broken, but because I wanted her to have the tools to understand that her mother's disappearance wasn't her fault. I watched my daughter flourish in a quiet, stable environment I had created. No more late-night screaming matches over credit card bills. No more tension-filled dinners where her mother's eyes were constantly glued to her phone, checking for messages from her latest client. One afternoon, while we were sitting on the back deck watching the sun set over the Puget Sound, Mia looked up from her sketchbook. "Dad?" "Yes, honey." "It's really quiet now," she said, her voice small but thoughtful. "But it's a good quiet. Like the house is finally breathing." My heart didn't break. It healed. I realized then that my blood hadn't run cold out of malice. It had run cold out of a primal need to protect this child from the chaos her mother thrived on. As the months passed, the legal proceedings reached their final, brutal conclusion. Because of the overwhelming evidence of financial fraud and the attempted subornation of perjury, the judge showed Chloe zero mercy. I was granted sole legal and physical custody. Chloe was granted supervised visitation once every 2 weeks, provided she remained current on her court-ordered child support, a figure calculated based on her potential earnings. Not her current bankrupt state. She had to sell her designer clothes. She had to sell her jewelry. She ended up working as a junior assistant at a boutique real estate firm in a neighboring county, earning a fraction of what she used to spend on a single weekend getaway. She was living in a one-bedroom apartment with a view of a brick wall, a far cry from the marble-floored mansion she had tried to steal from me. I stood in the driveway of my home, the home she had no claim to, and looked at the for sale sign I had finally put up. I didn't want to live in the wreckage of our past anymore. I had sold the property for a significant profit, every penny of which was going into a trust for Mia's future. I had won. Not just legally, but morally. I had kept my voice steady while hers became a shrill, desperate mess. I had kept my integrity while hers was revealed to be a hollow shell. The true measure of a person isn't how they behave when they're winning, it's how they unravel when they've lost their audience. For Chloe, the audience was everything. Without a social circle to envy her or a husband to bankroll her boss babe persona, she began to physically and mentally wither. I received a formal notification from the King County Prosecutor's Office. They were moving forward with charges of wire fraud and identity theft. Because the amount exceeded $75,000 and involved the crossing of state lines via the Delaware Shell Company, the federal authorities had taken a passing ESD. I didn't feel a surge of pity. When the investigator asked if I was open to a plea deal that involved a lighter sentence in exchange for full restitution, I didn't hesitate. "I don't want the money," I told the prosecutor over a secure line. "I've already written off the loss. What I want is a permanent, public record of the judgment. I want it to be the first thing that appears whenever anyone searches her name for the next 20 years. Integrity can't be bought back, and I want the world to know exactly what her signature is worth." The prosecutor sighed, a sound of weary agreement. "She's claiming she was coerced by the boyfriend, David. She's trying to pin the entire financial architecture on Marcus Vance." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Chloe doesn't get coerced into spending money. She's the architect. Marcus was just the heavy lifting. Check the timestamps on the luxury boutique purchases. Marcus wasn't buying $14,000 diamond bracelets for himself. He was the accessory, not the mastermind." The golden child was finally learning that in a court of law, excuses don't balance the ledger. While Chloe was navigating the nightmare of a criminal defense, I turned my attention to Marcus Vance. I wasn't content with him simply losing his car and his apartment. He had actively participated in a scheme to defraud my company and, by extension, my daughter's future. I didn't need to sue him for money he didn't have. I simply leveraged the paper trail. Marcus worked as a high-end personal trainer at an elite athletic club where several of my logistics firm's board members held memberships. I didn't send an angry email. I didn't make a scene. I simply hand-delivered a copy of the filed police report and the forensic audit, specifically the pages showing the direct transfers from my firm to his personal rent account to THE Club's general manager. "I thought you should know the caliber of person you have representing your brand," I said, my voice steady and professional. "He wasn't just training clients. He was laundering stolen funds through your facility's social network." Marcus was terminated before I even reached my car. The elite fitness world is a small, gossipy circle. By the end of the month, he was blacklisted from every reputable gym in the Pacific Northwest. The last I heard, he was working at a supplement warehouse, moving heavy crates for $12 an hour. The irony of him finally doing logistics for a living wasn't lost on me. But the most profound shift happened within the walls of my own home. Or rather, the new home I had purchased. It was a craftsman-style house on a quiet acre of land, far away from the sterile, glass and steel aesthetic Chloe had insisted on. There were no statement pieces, no networking rooms, just a large garden for Mia and a library filled with books I actually had time to read. One evening, Sarah came over for dinner. It was the first time we had spoken in person since the day the trap had snapped shut. We sat on the porch, the air cool and smelling of cedar. "I saw her yesterday," Sarah said quietly, swirling the wine in her glass. "At a grocery store in Renton. She looked different. No makeup. She was wearing a uniform from a local dental office. She saw me and immediately turned down another aisle. She couldn't even look me in the eye." "Good," I said. "Shame is a powerful teacher. It's the only one she's ever listened to. Do you ever regret it, David? Being so surgical about it?" I looked out at the tree line, watching a hawk circle in the distance. I regret that I waited 7 years to see the truth. I regret that I let her gaslighting make me doubt my own eyes. But the execution? No. If I had been nice about the divorce, she would have used that kindness as a weapon to take Mia. If I had given her a grace period, she would have drained the remaining equity in the dark. You don't negotiate with a fire while your house is burning down. You put it out. Sarah nodded, a look of profound respect in her eyes. "You saved yourself, David. And you saved Mia. Most men in your position would have just let her bleed them dry until there was nothing left but a shell." I took action, I said simply. "Because I'm sorry doesn't fix a bank account, and I'll change doesn't undo a forged signature." As we approach the final chapter of this reckoning, I've realized that the most important part of revenge isn't the suffering of the villain, it's the absolute, unshakable piece of the survivor. I had dismantled her life, yes. But in doing so, I had cleared the ground to build something that would actually last. Chloe eventually accepted a plea deal. She received 5 years of supervised probation, 3,000 hours of community service, and a permanent felony record for wire fraud. She is legally barred from ever holding a real estate license or any position involving fiduciary responsibility again. Every cent she earns for the next decade will be garnished until the restitution is paid. The golden child is now a cautionary tale. The final act of a narcissist's collapse is rarely a quiet affair. It is a frantic, messy attempt to find anyone to blame for the consequences of their own choices. For Chloe, that scapegoat was her mother, Evelyn. The toxic bond that had sustained them for decades, the shared delusion that they were sophisticated conquerors in a world of mediocre people shattered under the cold pressure of a federal restitution order. Since Chloe was now legally bankrupt and her wages were being garnished, the court began looking at the gifts she had bestowed upon her mother during the period of the fraud. Evelyn had received a $30,000 kitchen remodel and a designer wardrobe, all funded by the money Chloe had diverted from my firm. Under the voidable conveyance laws, the court ruled that those assets were technically stolen property. I received a frantic, high-pitched voicemail from Evelyn 3 months into the probation period. Her refined socialite accent was gone, replaced by the raw, jagged screech of a woman facing actual accountability for the first time in 60 years. "David, you have to stop this," she wailed. "The collectors are threatening to put a lien on my house because of the kitchen cabinets. Chloe is telling them it was my idea. She's telling the investigators that I pressured her to take the money. How could you let her do this to her own mother? You're the man of the family, you have to fix this." I listened to the recording twice. I didn't feel anger. I felt a profound sense of irony. The golden child had finally turned her predatory instincts on her own creator. It was the natural evolution of the parasite. When the host is gone, it devours the next closest thing. I kept my voice steady. I whispered to the empty office as I deleted the message. I didn't call her back. I didn't fix it. I let the legal system finish the job I had started. Chloe's social circle, once filled with high-net-worth friends and aspirational influencers, vanished as if they had never existed. In the world of optics, a felony conviction is more contagious than a plague. Her Instagram, once a curated gallery of fake luxury and manifestation quotes, was deactivated. She couldn't afford the lifestyle required to maintain the lie, and the truth was too ugly for her to face. About 6 months after the final decree, I had to meet Chloe at a neutral, court-mandated exchange point for her supervised visitation with Mia. It was a cold, gray Tuesday at a public library. I stood by the entrance, my hands deep in the pockets of my overcoat. Chloe pulled up in a beat-up, 10-year-old sedan with a cracked windshield, a far cry from the white Mercedes she used to drive like a weapon. She stepped out, and for a moment, I didn't recognize her. Her expensive hair extensions were gone. Her skin looked sallow, stripped of the professional glow that constant spa treatments used to provide. She was wearing a cheap, synthetic uniform from the dental office where she worked as a receptionist. She looked like a ghost of the woman I had married. "You look well, David," she said, her voice small and devoid of its former sharp edge. She didn't look me in the eye. She looked at the ground, at my shoes, at the pristine condition of my car. "I am well," I replied. "I heard you sold the house," she whispered. "I bet you got a lot for it. Must be nice to have all that security." "The security isn't in the money, Chloe," I said, leaning back against the brick wall. "The security is in not having to lie to maintain your life. You should try it sometime. It's remarkably quiet." "I'm paying it back," she snapped, a tiny flash of the old Chloe flickering in her eyes. "Every paycheck. I'm living in a shoebox, eating ramen and giving half my money to a government collector. Are you happy now? Is this the justice you wanted?" "I don't care enough about you to be happy or sad about your circumstances," I said, and I meant it. That was the final blow. I wasn't the angry ex-husband she could play the victim against. I was a stranger who happened to share a child with her. "I simply don't think about you at all. My focus is on ensuring Mia never becomes the kind of person who thinks a paper trail can be outrun." She winced as if I had struck her. She realized then that she had lost the only thing that ever truly mattered to her, her ability to affect me. I was indifferent. I was the mountain, and she was just the wind that had tried to move it and failed. Mia came out of the library then, accompanied by the social worker. She gave her mother a polite, distant hug, the kind of hug you give a relative you see once a year and barely remember. There was no drama, no tears, just a quiet, clinical observation of a broken bond. As I drove Mia home that evening, she was quiet for a long time. "Dead?" she asked as we pulled into our driveway. "Yes, Mia." Mom looks sad, but not the kind of sad where you want to help. It's the kind of sad where you're just tired of being yourself. I reached over and ruffled her hair. "That's a very perspective observation, honey. Some people spend their whole lives trying to be someone else. Eventually, they just run out of energy." I realized in that moment that the revenge wasn't about the $85,000. It wasn't about the house or the cars. It was about the truth. It was about stripping away the layers of gaslighting and manipulation until there was nothing left but the core reality of who we were. Chloe was a thief of hearts and finances. I was a protector of legacy and logic. As I sat in my new office that night, looking over the growth projections for my firm, I felt a deep, resonant peace. My blood didn't run cold anymore. It ran steady. I had protected my daughter. I had purged the rot from my life, and I had done it all without breaking a single law or losing my own soul in the process. The final settlement of the Miller vs. Miller saga didn't end with a bang, but with a series of quiet, bureaucratic clicks. The restitution was being paid, cent by painful cent, from Chloe's meager wages. Marcus Vance had disappeared into the anonymity of low-wage labor. And Evelyn? She had been forced to sell her beloved designer furniture to keep the bank from foreclosing on her house. The Golden Child dynasty had officially declared moral and financial bankruptcy. I stood in my new garden, watching Mia play with our new golden retriever. The air was crisp, the sky a clear, pale blue. I felt light. For the first time in a decade, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't scanning bank statements for hidden anomalies or bracing myself for a volatile outburst. I was simply living. Looking back at the wreckage of my marriage, I've realized that people like Chloe don't just steal your money, they steal your sense of reality. They make you believe that your boundaries are control, that your logic is coldness, and that your hard-earned security is a shared resource they have a divine right to squander. Air. But the truth is much simpler. A partner who respects you will never ask you to compromise your integrity to fund their delusions. I've learned 3 fundamental lessons from this journey that I will carry with me until the day I die, and they are lessons I am carefully teaching me every single day. First, trust is a gift, but verification is a duty. We often feel guilty for checking the paper trail of those we love. We feel like we're being paranoid or intrusive. But transparency is the foundation of any healthy relationship. If someone reacts with rage or gaslighting when you ask for financial clarity, they aren't defending their privacy, they are defending a lie. I didn't lose my marriage because I checked the accounts. I lost a predator because I finally opened my eyes to the math. Second, silence is the ultimate power. When the betrayal was revealed, my instinct was to scream, to confront, to demand an apology that would never be sincere. I'm glad I didn't. By staying cold and steady, I kept the tactical advantage. While Chloe was busy performing for an audience that no longer cared, I was building a legal fortress. Never warn your enemy when you're about to strike. Let the first thing they feel be the weight of the consequences. Third, you cannot save someone from their own entitlement. I spent years trying to budget for Chloe's vanity, thinking if I just provided enough investment, she would finally feel secure. But entitlement is a bottomless pit. You can pour your entire life's work into it, and it will still ask for more. The only way to win with a narcissist is to stop playing the game entirely. Cut the cord. Close the accounts. Walk away with your dignity and your daughter. Today, my logistics firm is more profitable than ever because I no longer have a silent leak in my overhead. My home is a sanctuary of truth. Sarah and I remain close friends. She's the godmother to me and now, a constant reminder that real loyalty doesn't come with a price tag or a forged signature. As for Chloe, she is a ghost in her own life. She still sends the occasional email, usually around the holidays, filled with vague promises of healing and spiritual growth. I never reply. I forward them to the archive and move on with my day. Her words have no value because they aren't backed by action. She is a woman who tried to burn down my world to keep herself warm, only to realize that I own the matches and the insurance policy. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I took action. And in the end, that was more than enough. So what do you think? Did I go too far or not far enough? Let me know in the comments below.